okay, the decision made by the Shariah Committee. The other issue is pertaining to the decision made by the Shariah Committee. I want to ask Dr. Aznan whether we want to treat or regard this as fatwa. Decision made by the Shariah Committee, is it fatwa? And to me, I'm okay, and I agree that, I mean, the Shariah Committee, for example, we have experts, which the Shariah Committee is good. They can help the Shariah Committee to decide. But is this decision fatwa or is only resolutions? And if it is a fatwa, then of course. And in my class, I used to discuss with my students. Most of them say this is fatwa because it is between halal and haram. And of course, if you talk about macro, you talk about sunnah, no, they don't want that. Industry, the players in the market just want to know halal or not halal, whether the product can be sold or not in the market. So it is between halal and non halal. So what do you think? Is it fatwa? And if it is fatwa, is it binding? Or it is only a resolutions and decision made by the Shariah Committee? Jazakumullah khairan.
Thank you, Dr. Aznan.
I believe that, if I remember correctly, I have to look at again at the provisions in the SGF. I don't remember that we, so-called the BOD has the final say, because as mentioned earlier in my slides, the board of directors need to recognize the independence of the Shariah Committee, and they are not supposed to set aside the decisions of the Shariah Committee. That is one of the assurances or requirements that we have in the framework. As Dr. mentioned, I mean, this is where the so-called accountability arises, because if the BOD has the final say, the issue of accountability does not arise, because meaning which, if the board can overrule the decision of the Shariah Committee, one of the most important components in SGF has been compromised, which is independence. As I mentioned earlier, independence means that the Shariah Committee has the right to make a decision that might not favor the expectations of the bank. And in this case, for example, you may say no to certain products that have been submitted to you, and the board of directors cannot overrule that so-called that decision, saying that I don't care what the Shariah Committee decides, I still want this product to go ahead. They can go ahead if they want to, but they will have the risk of non-compliance in the event of findings by the auditors, number one, and also our examiners later on. And that will have a huge reputational risk on the bank if they are found to be Shariah compliant, especially meaning which they are not so-called comply with the requirement of this so-called framework. I do not think that banks want to go into that mess later on with the regulator and as well as the auditor. So the expectation of this Shariah governance framework is to give that assurance to the Shariah Committee to enable for them to make clarity in their decisions and not to be influenced by the management. I understand that the management can be very so-called influential in terms of pushing the agenda. That was the reason why we come up with this SGF, because in many cases previously we saw that the influence of the management is very, very strong, and even the Shariah Committee reports to the CEO, not to the board. That's why I mentioned it's not extreme, Dr. Aznan. There are cases where the committee have never ever met the board, because the CEO say you report to me. It's not the board. So we are changing that so-called environment now, and I hope that if you feel that the SGF is not strong enough to give protection to the Shariah Committee, just give us the so-called what are the areas that we can improve further, so that when we revise this framework in the next few years, for example, we'll be able to strengthen, or maybe sometimes we can do minor amendments to our framework by way of circulars. But if you have any so-called proposals that you feel that can strengthen further the independence of the or competency of the Shariah Committee, tell us. we will be glad to review and to consider and to inform our management that why this so-called enhancement need to be carried out. Okay, thank you.
Whether it is a fatwa or not, opinion of the Shariah advisor of the bank in Malaysia is not a fatwa within Malaysian regulatory. Because a fatwa in Malaysia, people from admin of Islamic law in Malaysia can help me on that. A fatwa is a different set of situation, which is not in banking. That's from Malaysian legal perspective. Nevertheless, whether you call it fatwa, whether you call it resolution, is about a name. The main important thing is that it is binding upon the bank to accept it. If at Bank Negara, for example, any resolution of Shariah Advisory Council of Bank Negara binding upon Bank Negara Malaysia, that is by law, and also binding upon any financial institution in Malaysia, be it banking, be it Takaful. And any decision made by SAC of AC is binding on SC of Malaysia, and any products to be approved within the ambit of SC of Malaysia. Sorry, SC is Securities Commission of Malaysia. Question that we have. Remember when I made my presentation, I mentioned about situation in which in one meeting we have 3 members only attending, where we have 2 non-Shariah people and 1 Shariah people, and the quorum is 3. That is my concern actually. What I urge people in the Shariah committee to decide is that if you have less than 2 scholars attending the meeting, don't make a decision. Don't make a decision. If you have only 1 scholar and another 2 non-scholars, don't make a decision. Ensure that at least you get 2 scholars in a particular meeting for you to make a decision. Because scholars can debate with scholars in the Sharia, Islamic scholarly manner. We know how to discuss from usul fiqh perspective, from Quran fiqh perspective, from siyasah ammah perspective, from siyasah syariah perspective, from siyasah maliyah perspective. A lot of things to be considered, which, please understand me correctly, there is no intention to say bad about other people. You ask me about financial modeling, for example, I am zero on that. I don't know. That's not my area. But when you talk about syariah, only Johari mengenal manikam. That's the point. People may understand part of syariah, but to have a nitty-gritty of syariah, a very detailed syariah principle, only syariah people possess that. So they can only deliberate on that in a properly syariah manner. So if you have only 1 scholar in the meeting, he may try to convince others from his syariah point of view, and nobody to debate him there. If you have 2, then you have a sparring partner. He punch you, you punch back. Then it's fair for you to make a decision. I mean, to make some comparison for that. So don't make a decision unless you have in a particular meeting 2 scholars attending the meeting. Then only you have a Sharia debate there. Other people can make a decision, because you have to understand this is deen. Innahu deen, in one of some of the scholars said. It's about religion. It's about opinion of scholar, opinion of Sharia. You write, you sign, you understand that when you put the product to the market, there are 2 million, 3 million people using the product. Any mistake you made, they use that, you are in trouble. That is the basic Sharia understanding to that. So you sign, you may say that I sign or whatever. No. You have to understand, you allow the market to the product, 3 people subscribing to that, and you know that's wrong, you take their sin for that. Subhanallah. It's not easy. Allahu Alam.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Very spirited discussion from both experts. But before we end, I would like to draw on the privilege of the moderator chairman to make one final statement. And that is, I am extremely happy to find that inside the Sharia governance framework is a reference to legal documentation, where the Sharia advisor are required to look at the legal documentation. Now, there have been a suspicion that what is put inside the legal documentation sometimes override the original akad. The way Pak Mus described it is like getting married. You accept the marriage from the jurunikah, from the qadi, and after that he calls you in the corner and say, okay, you may have married the girl, but you cannot sleep with her for the next 25 years. These are conditions added into the legal documentation which defeats the akad. Now, Thank you very much for giving me that opportunity. Now, I would like...
25 years or 25 days?
Pamu said 25 years. It has been a very spirited discussion, both from the platform and the floor. Thank you very much indeed, Tuan Haji Rustam and Dr. Aznan. We would like to call upon Professor Azmi to give a token of appreciation to Tuan Haji Rustam. Dr. Aznan is a host. Please let's enjoy the refreshment. Thank you.